guys so much for being here. Um, Getting into this course, by the way, was more selective than getting into a lot of colleges in America. There was a pretty low acceptance rate, and even someone like Daniel Ek, the CEO of Spotify, was not able to get into this course and has FOMO about this course. So I hope you guys feel really special and just realize that like you are experiencing something that the CEO of Spotify was not able to experience tonight. That's pretty special. All right, so before we kick off and get into the actual content of tonight's workshop, first I just wanted to introduce myself. I think a lot of you guys know who I am, but just quickly, at a high level, I'm the founder and general partner of a new VC fund called Atelier, which is focusing on the creator economy and the passion economy. I've backed companies like Luma, Stir, Streamloots, Substack, Patreon. I think some of my portfolio CEOs are in this room. Thank you for choosing me. And I'm also a creator myself. So I have a podcast that I do on a weekly basis, Clubhouse regularly. I also have two newsletters, a free and a paid newsletter. I'm on YouTube. I have a slowly growing TikTok account. So I very much consider myself to be a creator. And also relevant to this course is the fact that I was an online creator even before that word existed. So during my childhood in the late 1990s and early 2000s, I was an online creator in the form of avidly online blogging on some of the early blogging platforms like Zanga and LiveJournal. I was all over the Neopets forum. I was really popular on the Neopets forum. Most of my friends were online rather than offline friends. I've been making art and crafts for my entire life. My first business, my first side hustle was actually when I was really little. I started a handmade envelope business where I would painstakingly handcraft envelopes to send letters in because I thought that that's what adults did, that they actually still sent physical mail. I ended up like spending probably 3 hours handcrafting every envelope and sold them for about 50 cents. So that was not a very good business. But anyways, the theme throughout my life has been this streak of creativity, and there were just very few paths for me to be able to monetize that creativity. And now that that's changing, I absolutely love to see it. And so I also want to support it for the next generation as well. So that's a bit about me. Where did this course come from? It's obvious probably to all of us in this room that the creator economy is now mainstream and a big topic of attention for everyone. It's important to note that creators have been around for a long time, but they're finally being recognized for the value that they are providing to UGC platforms. And probably a lot of us have felt a lot of the excitement and energy around this space over the last year. But overall, I would say that the creator economy is still nascent. And while there's a lot of piecemeal resources, blog posts, podcasts about the creator economy, I felt like there wasn't a great comprehensive educational resource for people to turn to. And since I've been a creator myself for a long time, and since I've been immersed in the creator ecosystem for years, I wanted to create something to fill this gap and to share my learnings from studying this space from different vantage points. And so, in true creator form, here we are with a creator-led course about the creator economy. And yeah, this is my first creator-led course, and this is my first cohort-based course that I'm ever teaching. So bear with me, by the way. And what are the goals of this course? My hope is that everyone emerges 4 weeks after this course is over, having learned a lot about creators and bringing new perspectives to the companies that they're working at. I also hope that we can all build and invest in products that better serve creators. And then on a macro level, I want us to create a larger impact in the creator ecosystem. The students in this course represent this really incredible cross-section of folks who are building for creators in all sorts of different ways. And I think collectively, we can all make a really huge impact in empowering more people in the world to be able to earn a living from their creative abilities. So here's a quick rundown of what we'll be exploring in the next few weeks. There's a really densely packed schedule. I'm so excited for everything. Today, we're going to be focusing on establishing a broader overview of the creator landscape and setting a definition on who creators are, their priorities, and their life cycle. We're also going to have a special guest, Kevin Lin from Twitch, speaking about their internal framework of how they think about creators. And later this week, we'll turn to creator monetization, all the different ways that creators can earn income and how they prioritize them. Next week, we'll have 2 guest workshops led by Conrad Wadowski, the co-founder of Teachable, about growth and distribution. We'll have another guest workshop led by Justin Moore, who's a student in the course and also a successful YouTuber, to chat about the brand side of the ecosystem. There's a lot of energy right now about direct user monetization, but we can't forget that most creators are actually making a living from brands and sponsorships and advertising. And then in the final week, week 3, I'll share my investor perspective of how to evaluate startups, pull in Blake Robbins for that from Ludlow Ventures. And then I'll share my thinking of predictions about what I think is going to happen in the future of the creator economy. And then there's a bonus week. So this wasn't advertised, but there's a bonus week. So week 4, there are 2 guest workshops. One is going to be led by Jesse Walden, who is a close friend of mine that runs a crypto fund, and he's going to be talking about the intersection of crypto and the creator economy. And then lastly, we'll bring in Nathan Barry, who's the founder and CEO of ConvertKit, who has been building for creators for the last decade, to talk about that experience. So with all of that out of the way, let's get started. Oh, Bomi, do you want to do this?
Yeah, so some housekeeping on how the workshop interaction will work. So there's over 140 people in this room, as you can tell, and we want to make sure that Lee is able to focus on her content, and at the same time, we can ask questions and she can ask you guys questions. So the way that's going to work is when she asks the room a question, you'll type it out in the chat. So in the Zoom chat, feel free to add any commentary or answer all the questions that Lee might be asking the audience. But when you have questions, there's a handy dandy channel for that called Workshop Questions. So just to make sure that you guys know where that is, I've posted a sample question in the Workshop Questions channel. I want you guys to go upvote my question just to make sure, and I better see at least 50 upvotes before I move forward. Okay, wow, that's the most emojis I've ever gotten. 55 upvotes. Great. So the way that works is that helps Rachel prioritize who to call on. So Rachel, I see a highly upvoted question with 100 emojis. Can you do your thing?
Wow. I've never seen so many emojis. So the question, Lee, is why are you so obsessed with corgis?
So I think I am just in general pretty obsessed with animals. So caveating all of this by sharing the fact that I'm sadly allergic to everything that has fur, everything alive that has fur. So I'm allergic to like all pets, unfortunately, horses, cats, dogs, the whole shebang. And I feel like it is God playing this trick on me because I'm absolutely obsessed with animals and I wish that I could like have a ton of pets. But it's probably a blessing in disguise because if I wasn't allergic to animals, I would probably be on an island, like running some sort of animal sanctuary instead of doing what I do today. So this keeps me productive. But in specifically with respect to corgis, I just think that the shape is really charming. Like they look like loaves of bread. I think when they walk, it's really funny. When they go upstairs, it's just hilarious. So I love corgis, but there's a lot of other types of animals that I love.
I didn't think you were going to give that long of a response. I should have asked a different question. I was just,
I could go on about animals. Basically, my TikTok feed is all pets that I follow.
Great. So the point is there's going to be a lot of questions. So ask it in the Slack, and upvoting each other's questions helps prioritize who to call on. So you ask your questions in Slack. When Lee asks questions and wants you to answer, post it in the chat because she'll be able to read those and comment on that. And then the last thing is we want to improve on this experience. So after each workshop, we're going to have a survey and please fill it out. And Rachel will follow up after workshops in the announcement channel with next steps. And by the next morning, you'll see a recording of this workshop posted in your syllabus tab. of your student portal. And if you have any questions about any of this stuff, feel free to DM either Rachel or I on Slack. And with that said, Lee, take it away.
Awesome. So basically answer my questions here and then ask questions in Slack. Okay, great. All right, let's dive into the workshop. So workshop 1 is all about this overview of the creator landscape. But before we get any further, I want all of us to get on the same page about WTF is a creator. Like, who are creators? When we talk about the creator economy, who exactly are we actually talking about, and what is the definition of a creator? So we are going to get you into breakout rooms to both introduce yourselves and to discuss the question here. So you'll have 8 minutes to just share a little bit about who you are, what you're working on, and then also share your definition of what a creator is. And then when you come back, every group should nominate someone. So before you come back, nominate someone to share their answer about what a creator is.
Great. So click the join breakout room button. It should pop up on your screen right now. Everyone should be gone.
Yep, people are transporting. Make sure you click the join in the pop-up.
Okay, 7:15, so like 7:23.
There are some stragglers, but I'm assuming.
That's normal. That's always gonna happen.
Is that normal? Okay, I'm gonna broadcast a message.
Coco, do you see a join breakout room button?
Me, breakout room button. Let me see.
It should be right in the middle of your screen. Join breakout room.
Let me see.
If not, I can try to move you manually.
Actually, to someone else, and maybe it'll pop up.
Oh, I saw it. Okay.
Great. Wes is too cool for breakouts. I'm just kidding.
So is Katya.
I've got a timer set up.
Okay, ooh, timer.
Sorry?
I just said fancy timer.
You know, a week ago at this exact time, the power went out for an hour. So hopefully that doesn't happen tonight. It was like ice raining, freezing rain situation, which isn't happening tonight, hopefully.
Hopefully. Fingers crossed.
No, I charged everything just to make sure. So, yeah, I would just like hotspot onto my phone and try to do this by candlelight.
Rachel, so it looks like the mute thing wasn't working, like muted upon entry. And there's this weird thing I have to turn on. So it'll work for future workshops. But as people come back in, if you can help me click mute manually on people, because they're not going to be muted by default. So I was actually doing that. I didn't want to like throw you off.
Creates something, whether it be content or a physical object that is valued and used by other people other than themselves. And I think most of the folks in our group echoed some kind of variation of that. I think a key piece was that it's used by someone else rather than just themselves.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So it could be physical, a physical object, not just digital. Yeah. Got it. Let's go to Kim.
Hi, everyone. Ours was similar, but slightly different. We defined a creator as someone who makes something tangible, whether physical or digital, and puts it out into the world.
Got it. Okay, someone who makes something physical or digital and puts it out into the world. So there's like a public sharing element of this. Got it. I'm going to call on, let's see, Alexei Weistrov.
Yeah. So our version of that is the most important thing is audience. So creator is not creator without the audience, and you can like have an audience after a deathbed or something, but eventually you have to have one. So it could be a like compact, like just a few people that you selected, or everyone, but you have to have the audience. The other thing is that the object of your creation could be absolutely anything. It could be story, code, video, painted rocks, whatever. So the only thing that our group decided that matters is an audience.
Got it. Interesting. Okay, so there needs to be like an element of audience and influence, like people need to be consuming it and wanting to consume whatever the creator is making.
Yeah, we actually came up with that when we decided to make the thought exercise of trying to figure out if code is like being a coder is being a creator, and then we kind of compared open source with coding for Facebook or whatever, and we figured out that open source is more like being a creator because you have an audience, and if you work for Facebook, then Facebook owns all the IP, so it doesn't work this way.
Got it. Interesting. I'm going to call on one last person. So Kieran for room 20, do you want to share what your guys' definition was?
Yes, I can. So ours went super long and our introductions went super long that I just introduced one definition and everyone kind of forced me into it. So I'm good.
Okay.
I'll say mine. So basically, for me, a creator is anyone who repeatedly, one, iterates on artifacts they've brought into existence, two, intends to have other parties interact with said artifacts, and three, wants to be able to keep producing and iterating on those artifacts with minimal friction. So that's kind of like a very theoretical, lifecycle agnostic, audience agnostic definition.
Interesting. So the focus of that definition is more on the creation side. Are they trying to constantly improve on their creation and iterating on it?
Iterating on their creation, but also kind of like thinking about the fact that they're, creating not only for themselves, but for other people, and to do it, to keep on doing so with minimal friction. So whether that be through retaining an income or any other kind of like method that will allow them to keep on creating.
Right. There needs to be like a sustainability element to the creation.
Exactly.
Really interesting. I love how all of these definitions are actually quite different from each other, and there's no single definition. So I'm going to share 3 definitions of creator, what a creator is that I commonly reference, and you'll see that they actually have different components to them too. So all of these 3 definitions are at varying levels of broadness, and this is perhaps the broadest one. So this is a definition that I crowdsourced from Twitter last year by asking my followers this exact question, like, what is a creator? And this is a definition from Jay Klaus that I've been commonly referencing. So he said, a creator is someone who makes an asset for the purpose of being consumed and also aims to create value for both the audience and themselves. So let's break this down a little bit. So the first part is creating something for the purpose of being consumed. So in other words, the creator is not making something for themselves in private, they're doing it for an audience. So folks who are creating for themselves are perhaps not creators. Maybe the best word for them is something like artist. I do agree with this element of the definition, which is that you have to be creating for someone else, and there's an intentionality of creating something to be consumed. The second part of this definition is aiming to create value for both the audience and themselves. So a creator is creating value, and that value can take different forms. It could be entertainment value, like we see on TikTok, educational value, like we see in this course. It could just be for the sake of relieving people's boredom. It could be for health and fitness benefits, career-related value. But the common thread is that creators are giving value to an audience while also creating value for themselves. I think the drawback of this definition is that perhaps it's a little too broad on both the high end of the market as well as the low end of the market. So on the high end of the market, this definition would net you celebrities, athletes, novelists, anyone who is famous would fit into this definition, even if they're not digitally native. And then on the low end of the market, I think it captures a lot of people who may not even consider themselves to be creators. I shared this definition recently with a journalist who was covering the creator economy, and she was like, doesn't this encompass people who are just texting their friends? Like if I'm texting my friend, I'm creating something that's designed to be consumed and it's creating value for both them and myself. I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. So maybe this definition is a little too broad. So that brings me to definition 2. So an alternate definition of a creator is creators are people who have fame and influence, and that fame and influence stems from digital democratized channels. So I got this definition from someone who works at a large social networking company. And I like this definition because there's two things. One is like there's an audience component, like they need to have an audience. They have fame, they have influence over a set of people, and that audience has accrued from digital democratized channels. So it's a very digitally native definition. It excludes folks like athletes, movie stars, journalists, like people whose fame comes from non-digital, non-democratized channels. And I can see how this definition would be really advantageous and useful to people who are working on tech products and tech platforms who want to serve like homegrown talent on that platform that's completely native to them. And here's just a graphic from Ben Thompson's blog that illustrates how the internet has democratized content creation and distribution. Anyone can basically publish their thoughts using the internet now. And so creators are folks who are using the platforms on the right-hand side of this chart, like Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Clubhouse. Creators would not be the folks on the left-hand side, like the journalists, magazine writers, television stars, radio hosts, etc. So it's a very digitally native definition. And then the last definition that I wanted to share, which is perhaps the most controversial, aspirational, and exclusive definition, is that creators are digital cult leaders. So backing up for a moment, cults are basically a social movement that is usually centered upon a charismatic leader, and they are marked by special rites and ceremonies that a lot of other people might find weird. And cults have existed throughout history. Cults used to exist around religious leaders, political leaders, royalty. Even in a democratic society like America that doesn't have royalty, we elevated celebrities to the level of royalty and worship them for being larger than life. And so cults tap into this very perennial, primal human desire for meaning, purpose, and belonging. People want to belong to something that is bigger themselves, and they want to feel accepted and loved. And with organized religion on the decline, I think creators fulfill this desire for meaning and belonging that has been left as a void. And obviously, we have other types of cults in our modern day society as well. Like we have the MAGA cult, which is quite cult-like. There's Wall Street Bets, like the stuff around GameStop was kind of culty as well. But creators represent a modern type of cult leader that are very influential, charismatic, and digitally native. And so what's changed now versus before is that these cults stem from social media, and who we form cults around stems from digital channels. And obviously, this definition is a little bit exclusive because not every creator makes it to cult status. Think of your Etsy store owner, or just like a teacher on OutSchool or Skillshare. Like perhaps they wouldn't consider themselves cult leaders, like their customers don't feel that level of intense emotion towards them. But I think on the extreme end, like the best creators, those with the highest longevity, those with the most follower love, they do resemble cult leaders. I'm curious what you guys think of this definition. Do you agree, disagree? You can type it into the chat. Similar to step chickens? Yes. Agree. Okay. I did see some people saying that I was a cult leader in the Intro's channel. Interesting. Definition 3 is what I would use to differentiate between creators with a capital C and creators. Got it. Okay, so yeah, it feels like people kind of agree. Okay, so let me make a stronger case for creators as cult leaders. So delving into this particular definition a little bit more, I think the creators who are cult leaders and more cult-like, they're giving their followers a sense of meaning and purpose and direction. They're giving followers a mission to orient around. So the creators actually impact the follower's sense of personal identity. The creator is very inspirational and they elicit this emotional response. If you've ever seen a live Tesla event with Elon Musk on stage, the crowd completely loses their minds. They're screaming, there's frantic clapping. It's very cult-like, in my opinion. Secondly, the creator cults are often united by a set of common beliefs, rituals, and vocabulary. So in the digital world, these creator cults are often identified through common markers of identity. You can see like the same profile picture that they always set. Maybe they're always using the same emojis in their profile. Right now, there's like the laser eyes going on Twitter on their profile pictures. They'll raid other people's comment sections. There's badges that they'll use on their profiles. They could do challenges together. So there's like a set of common behaviors and rituals and markers of identity. And then lastly, these creators are leaning on their communities to take different actions and spread the word and educate others. So creators aren't just operating in isolation, they're actually harnessing the energy of their followers to take different actions. And so I think on the top tier of the creator market, like creators do resemble cult leaders in all of these different ways. And there's this intensity of love. And as a result of this, there's lots of different ways to monetize these kinds of creator relationships than just a more utilitarian creator. As I'm describing these three elements of creators as cult leaders, I'm curious if any creators come to mind for you guys. You can type it into the chat. Yeah, Elon, Donald Trump, Lenny, Joe Rogan, James Charles for sure, Chamath, Mr. Beast, AOC, I agree, David Dobrik for sure, Naval, absolutely. Like I think the commonality of all of these folks that people are naming is that like there's this emotional connection to the creator. There's a sense that like when the creator is successful, I'm succeeding. And like my identity, the line between my identity and the creator's identity is blurred, which is really interesting. This article from Taylor Lorenz last year in the New York Times explored how cults were arising on TikTok, where creators would get their fans to take different actions, like changing their profile picture, rating other users' comment section. And she specifically talked about the rise of the Step Chickens cult. And it was just really interesting to see that the language that we use around social platforms and around creators reflects this kind of religious cult-like dynamic. We use the language of religion to describe the creator economy. We use terms like followers, leaders, speakers. We talk about simps, stands. People are on a stage. Then there's the audience. And then if you go into the TikTok comment section, a lot of the comments are like queen, all caps, like queen, or like this speaks to me. So it's just really fascinating that I think throughout history, our behavior around cult leaders and now creators has been pretty consistent, where we have this zealous, unquestioning commitment to them. We jump to their defense. We punish people who oppose them in dissent, etc. Cult leaders as creators come in all different sorts of shapes and sizes. Do people know who these three folks on the slide are? If someone gets all three correct, I will give them a prize. Okay, you can only get all three correct if you like type all three. But I like this crowdsourced approach. Okay, I think Victor got it all. Amazing. I think Victor from Luma, hello Victor, is the first person to get all three. So it's PewDiePie on the left. PewDiePie is a YouTuber who is probably one of the only YouTubers who's been popular for as long as he has. Like most YouTubers fade in and out of obscurity, but he actually has pretty long longevity. So he rose to fame as a Twitch streamer, and he's still popular to this day. His fans have been described as very cult-like. The middle person is someone named Kayla Itznes. Thank you. She is a fitness creator who is quite cult-like. She leads fitness challenges. She transforms her followers' bodies. People like follow all of her workouts. And so the types of value that creators as cult leaders are offering to their followers can also look very different. There can be fitness value, but some can just provide like boredom relieving value. And then creators as cult leaders, they could be leading cults of all sorts of different shapes and sizes. They could be niche, or they could have a broad interest area. This last creator on this page is someone named Chris Sutherland. He's actually a physics professor at USC, and he has 2 million followers on TikTok who I would definitely describe as very cult-like. They actually, what has happened is like people are applying to USC just to be able to take his class and to study physics with him. So it's like he is single-handedly transforming the attractiveness of the college and of the school and of physics as like a major. So he's quite culty as like a creator himself. But the point here is that creators as cult leaders can all look pretty different from each other. And we'll come back later during this workshop to talk about how tech products can actually enable creators' cults. And here's an example in Korea of the lengths that fans will go to support their favorite creators, which is quite cult-like. So this is BTS. It's a 7-member South Korean boy band. Their fans are famous for doing like completely over-the-top extravagant things. Things like sleeping outside in tents before their concert, buying multiples of products that they have no use for just to support the creator financially. They also are known to like donate money to other fans so that they can also go buy their products just to support this band. And so they do these like extremely grand gestures in order to show their love towards this band, which just goes to show how cult-like it can be.
Hey, Lee, we have got a audience question.
Yeah.
All right. So Travis asked, how does this definition of the cult leader and thought leader fit with domain experts who create content but don't have a wide audience? So if you imagine like top researchers, top practitioners who are not celebrities.
Yeah, I think these creators as cult leaders are a very specific like lens on the creator economy. And the dimension that I'm honing in on for these cult leader creators is like the emotional resonance that they have with their fans and the emotional connection that they form with their followers, like how much love there is. And so I think creators can provide all sorts of different value. Not every creator has to inspire this kind of love and passion and devotion. And a lot of creators do fine just by providing very utilitarian value if they're teaching a subject or they're expert in something in particular. But I think this creator as a cult leader framework is really tapping into that emotional element. And I think if a creator rises to the level of being a cult leader, they have many more different ways to monetize than if they're providing like a much more one-dimensional type of value to their followers. Cool. All right, let's continue. So regardless of what your definition of creator is, here are a few traits that all creators have in common. So one is that creators are productizing and monetizing individuality. So their products and services literally would not be the same without them. This makes being a creator very different from being a gig worker because who the creator is matters. Secondly, they're all independent. So they're operating independently. They're solopreneurs who are in charge of their own destinies. No one is telling them what to do. There's no manager, there's no boss to tell them if they're doing the right or wrong things. And while collaboration is common in the industry, creators at the end of the day are operating independently with all of the upsides and the downsides of that. And then lastly, all creators are going direct to consumer. So they're bypassing traditional gatekeepers and going directly to their audience, mediated by new digital platforms. Okay, now that we've scoped out the definition of what a creator is, I'm curious, how many do you guys think exist in the world in terms of the creator market size? Like how many creators actually exist in the world today? You can type your answer into the chat. 50 million. Okay, I see people have read this report that I assigned as homework. 50, 100, 1 billion, 5% of people, 27 period. Okay. So estimates vary widely, and you guys are kind of all correct because the estimates are so broad. So depending on which research report you're looking at, there's completely different orders of magnitude in terms of estimates of creator market sizing. It's hard to pin down the exact number of creators in the world for a few reasons, but going back to what we just discussed, the core issue is that the definition of what's included in the term creators and the creator market can vary really widely. So estimates that I've listed here are like 15 million in the US, 50 million in the world, and then 364 million in the world. So completely different orders of magnitude. And the reason why is every market sizing is looking at different platforms or different jobs. So the Signal Fire report here is looking at just social media creators. They have YouTube, Instagram, Twitch, and other platforms, whereas the Mighty Networks report is looking at Instagrammers, Facebook group leaders, Facebook groups that have more than like 20,000 members. They're calling those creators, like those admins are creators. It also includes like professional coaches, event organizers, podcasters, self-published authors, freelancers. So anyone who has a freelance job is a creator per this definition. And so the market sizing is going to vary really a lot based on which specific platforms or which specific jobs you're looking at. And this brings me to this point that I really want to stick with students throughout this course. Like if you get nothing else from this course, this is like the main point that I want to drive home, which is that creators are vast and diverse, and there's no single monolithic identity of who a creator is. Creators are not homogeneous. That's the alternate title of this course. Creators are not homogeneous. And so I get a lot of pitches from founders who are like, we're building for the creator market, and we're building for all creators. And I'm like, who do you mean by that? Like, who is a creator? Because there's so many different sub-segments of the creator space, and there's no single monolithic identity of who a creator is. So you really need to find your niche in order to build something that deeply resonates with a subset of the creator universe. So here's like a first segmentation of the creator space. Like a lot of creators will identify with a certain platform, and that's because they typically invest in a certain platform, and that platform is where they spend the majority of the time, where their audience is typically the largest. But this can shift throughout time. Like creators can start on YouTube and then migrate to TikTok, or vice versa, or they could be, historically a Vine star and then they've moved to YouTube. And so the segmentation by platform, it's sort of like a moment in time segmentation, and it doesn't necessarily persist throughout time. But usually you'll hear a lot of companies saying like, we're geared towards YouTubers, or we're trying to serve TikTok creators better. Another type of segmentation you can do in the creator market is going by industry vertical. So looking at the specific type of work and the type of value that they're giving to an audience and segmenting it that way. So the creator market, you could segment by like teachers, salespeople, personal shoppers, personal coaches, fitness instructors, etc. And then based on that particular industry vertical, you could think through all of the different products that would better serve their needs. You could also segment the industry landscape by content type. So here's a few examples of different content types that a lot of companies are building towards. And another reason why creators are so hard to pin down is because there can be really blurry lines between who is a creator versus who's just a user. We all have that friend on Instagram who doesn't consider herself to be a creator, but she somehow has like 10,000 followers just because she's really pretty. And she shares great content, but like she doesn't have any intention to grow. So is she actually a creator? I'm not sure. And so for folks who work at social platforms, I'm really curious how you guys think about distinguishing the boundaries between a regular user versus a creator, because I think that's where things can get a little bit muddy. Like if anyone has any thoughts on like the specific quantitative or qualitative indicators that you use to distinguish between the two segments, I'd be really curious to hear about that in the chat. Yeah, so there's like casual creators. So velocity of content creation, that's really interesting. Passiveness versus activeness. Monetization, output and following, intention, originality, intentionality, people who want to make it a full-time thing, authority, their own attitude towards the work. That's really interesting. So I think, yeah,
We have a question that's relevant to this.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Somia asks, what are creators motivated by? And assuming creators are different levels of Maslow's hierarchy, fame, money, how do we build for that, for their needs?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that question later in the next section. We're going to talk about that directly. So I like these answers a lot. Frequency of creation, velocity of creation. I think some signals that you could look at potentially would be like follower count. Are they using features like hashtags? Like there's an aspiration to grow. Frequency of posting, whether they have a public versus a private profile, suggests something. If they're using new features like Reels or Spotlight, that perhaps indicates a desire to grow. But in general, there's just no definitive line between a user versus a creator, which makes market sizing so challenging. And I also think in general, there's going to be new types of creators emerging in the future that we can't even anticipate yet. And I think there's an opportunity for the founders and the operators in the room to birth new types of creators and to serve these new types of creators that we haven't even seen before. And these new types of creators evolve from new formats and new network structures and social graphs. For instance, like being a paid newsletter writer used to be a creator category that didn't really exist. Like Ben Thompson was kind of the only person who was that. But because of Substack, being a paid newsletter writer is now much more of a common thing than it used to be. TikToker didn't exist before TikTok, obviously. New computing platforms are also going to arise that will engender entirely new types of content creators and new societal catalysts as well. With the move towards remote everything with the pandemic, there's a lot of new creator categories that used to be offline that have had to have a remote counterpart and shift their entire business to online. So now we have virtual music instructors, virtual doctors, virtual fitness instructors, etc. I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts or predictions on what are some other types of creators that we'll see in the future that aren't prevalent yet today. Teacherpreneurs. Yes. My biggest learning from doing this course, by the way, is that teachers should get paid a lot more. That is my big learning.
Dave McClure in the workshop has a question around curators.
Yeah, go for it.
Dave, do you want to ask?
Yeah, what wasn't so, well, I guess it's a combination of question and comment. Just, I think with a lot of, there's so much content out there, the role of a curator, promoter, and actually even a remixer might add a lot of value that's not just based on the original content itself. So, I mean, I hesitate to say film critics and music critics should be more awesome than music creators or filmmakers, but there's just so much stuff out there to listen or look at. You know, I would rely a lot on people who can help me find great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the question is like how much value accrues to the curation layer versus the creator themselves. My impression is that in the real world, curators don't actually like get that much value versus the original artist or the original writer. I could be wrong about that, but I agree. I think in a world with like tons of different content and it being like very hard to parse, I think that could change. I like a lot of the suggestions in here, like NFT artists, travel creatives, creators who sell algorithms, chefpreneurs, like chefs being unbundled from restaurants and becoming entrepreneurs. That's really awesome. Okay, I'm going to speed it up because we still have a guest speaker after this. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is the creator lifecycle. So obviously we've learned that creators are all really different from each other, but they roughly share a common life cycle. So creators are all at different stages of the life cycle. And one question that I typically ask companies that are pitching me is like, what stage of the life cycle are the creators that you're serving? And like at the very beginning of their journey is when these creators can have very blurry lines with users, because they could look like just regular users in terms of their follower size. But there's a desire to grow, and there's a desire to iterate on the format and to grow their following. So at the very beginning of their life cycle, these are creators who are motivated by the desire to create something, whether that's videos, podcasts, photographs, whatever. And there's an inherent desire for self-expression and joy in the process of creation itself. Next, after that, is needing to provide a like tangible value to an audience in order to grow. So after they've created something, they need to iterate on content, format, talk to followers, engage in collaborations in order to grow their audience. Next is monetization. So creators are finding different ways to monetize their content in order to sustain their content creation. And then lastly, a very small subset of the creator world is able to actually start a sustainable business and manage and grow their own business. And so this is basically like a funnel, because at every step, there's creators who drop off and don't proceed to the next step of the funnel. The biggest part of the creator space is people who are just creating something. Then we have drop off to those who build an audience, and drop off to those who monetize. And it's interesting to note that I think not all creators are driven by monetization, at least in the short term. And a lot of them would actually give up monetization in the short term for more audience growth. And so today, there's often a tension between, do I monetize versus do I give out my content for free and try to grow my audience more so that I can have like invest into my future monetization. And at all times during this life cycle, they need to stay relevant, maintain their reputation, maintain their follower love, etc. And at every stage of the life cycle, there's opportunities for tech platforms to serve creators. So you could serve creators by making it easier to create something, or to make it easier to build their audience, to monetize, etc. And there's also a creator growth loop happening in the background, where as creators are succeeding and growing and moving through this funnel, some of their audience represents potential future creators. So the big creators are inspiring smaller ones, and new creators are born, completing the life cycle. You can also visualize this creator life cycle as basically a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but what I call the creator hierarchy of needs, because Maslow has nothing to do with this. But if you guys recall Maslow from Psych 101, according to Maslow, we have 5 different categories of human needs. Each layer needs to be fulfilled before we can progress onto the next layer. So per Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the first layer was physiological needs, like air, water, food, shelter, clothing, sleep. The second layer was safety, security, employment, resources. Next came love, like friendship, intimacy. Then came esteem. Do we have respect and recognition? And then finally, at the top of the pyramid, there was self-actualization. So the desire to become the most that we could be, to realize our full potential. And per his theory, like we could only like the next need would emerge when we've previously satisfied the prior need. And what's interesting in the creator space is that I think the creator hierarchy of needs is actually the inverse of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where self-actualization actually comes first. A lot of creators start creating because they want to just create something for the joy of creating something. There's value to themselves, and there's like this fulfillment element of creating something. And then they realize that they can actually build an audience, and they can deliver more value to their audience. And so they're realizing the esteem part of Maslow's hierarchy. And then lastly, they're monetizing and fulfilling like their physiological needs, and able to monetize their content creation and to be able to provide for themselves. And the reason why it's inverted versus Maslow's hierarchy of needs is because creators often start content creation as a side hustle, in addition to their main hustle. So they typically have a job that provides for their physiological needs, and they do content creation on the side as a labor of love. And so it's tapping into that self-actualization need. And that's why the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is inverted in the creator space. Alan Lau, the founder of Wattpad, who I recently spoke with on Clubhouse, expressed this creator's hierarchy of needs in different words. He basically said 99% of people who write on Wattpad are motivated by their fan base and engagement, and only a small portion really go into things focused on monetization. I'm curious if you guys agree or disagree with this observation based on your own experiences building or looking at the creator space. Agree. Yes. Okay. So pretty unanimously agree. I agree with it too. I think 99% is pretty high. But I do think that most creators get into content creation for the passion and the love of content creation, and that's the underlying motivator rather than the monetization aspect. And that has implications for what we build and what we cater for. This creator hierarchy of needs basically maps into 3 classes of tools that are serving creators. So this is like my mental market map of how I think about the landscape of different companies that are building for creators. So the topmost part of the funnel, so this whole thing represents like a 3-step funnel that creators think about moving their audience through. So the topmost part is like follower acquisition. How do I create something and build my audience base? And the companies that are best serving this are the horizontal social platforms like TikTok and Instagram, where creators are leveraging it for the potential to be discovered, and it's all free to the user. Next, they're trying to take those audiences that they've built on those free social platforms and move them down the funnel and convert them to more engaged fans and followers. And to do this, they're leveraging tools like Linktree, podcasts. They might be starting a free newsletter and getting them to give their email address. And then the next step is monetizing that follower base. And they do that by using some new tools like Substack, Supercast, Teachable, Patreon, etc. And then there's also stuff that's adjacent to this in the creator landscape too, like Adobe or Canva for content creation, Google Docs for writing things. But basically, this is like the rough funnel of what the creator stack looks like and the tools that they're using. The other way to look at these creator platforms is through the lens of cult enablement, going back to our definition of creators as cult leaders. So platforms are kind of shifting their approach recently to enable creator cults, whether it's helping creators to grow their cult member size, deepen their influence over cult members, or to monetize their cults. So for instance, I would consider OnlyFans to be a cult product. Users are paying for DMs from the creators. They're subscribing to a certain creator. That creator is like elevated versus them. I think of Community, this text message product, is also a cult product because it allows creators to scale their sense of intimacy and deepen their engagement with their followers. Or Clubhouse, like creators are literally getting onto what's called a stage and talking at an audience, and followers can be blessed by the creator by being invited onto the stage or being shouted out or occupying the front row of the audience. And Sam Lessin recently wrote about this in the information, where he said we're moving away from community-based products and towards cult-driven social platforms. In the early days of the internet, it used to be that everyone who joined a social product was basically on an equal footing. They were very communication-based, community-based. Everyone was just a user. Your network was comprised of your friends from the real world. But now people are utilizing social platforms to hear from these powerful cult-esque leaders, and elevating their standing in front of the eyes of their leader is something that they care about. And so even as some of these platforms have stayed the same throughout the years, the way that we use them is very different. Like the way that we used to use Twitter 10 years ago was completely different from the way that we're using Twitter now. Twitter 10 years ago, your timeline was filled with like your friends from real life talking about what they ate for breakfast. Today, people are using Twitter to be a thought leader, to increase their status. They're using features like spaces and fleets to get onto an audience and to deepen their engagement with their audience. And so I enjoy thinking about creator products from the lens of like what enables creators to grow their cult, strengthen their cult, and monetize the cult. And this has really interesting implications for how you would design products. You could look at the stack of different creator products through the lens of a creator like Logan Paul. So at the top of the funnel, he's using products like Vine, YouTube. He has basically a presence on every social platform. And then he's converting that audience into more engaged audiences through his podcast, through his Maverick Club, which is like his private fan community. And then he has all of these different ways of monetizing those cult members through his paid membership community, through his clothing line, through his like pay-per-view boxing thing. He recently did this NFT thing. And so this week's assignment, by the way, is all about like how tech products are enabling and facilitating these kinds of creator cults. Okay, so since we're running short on time, I just want to see, like, is Kevin Lin? Kevin, if you're there, please say something in the chat so I can call you up.
I don't see him on the participant list yet.
Oh God. Okay, let me just message him.
Okay.
Meanwhile, if you have any questions,
You can get
type
the
it
CEO
in
of
the chat.
Spotify instead then if you want to jump in now.
I asked a question on the Slack channel, but basically, why do you think there is a trend from community to cult? Like, what is driven this? Like,
Well, I think to my previous point, like I think humans just have this perennial desire to like worship something that is bigger than us and that gives our lives meaning and purpose and like gives us a sense of belonging. And so I think in the days of the early internet, like that kind of need was just fulfilled by other institutions and other people. But given that we are now at a more mature stage of these social platforms, I think these cult leaders tend to just be folks who have amassed a following and an audience from digital platforms rather than people from like elsewhere in the world. Like I think in days of the early internet, we still worshiped like celebrities like Britney Spears, and like that's who we looked up to and that's who we like loved and defended and joined the fan clubs of. But now that influence is just shifting to folks who've built an audience on digital platforms.
Thank you.
Leah, I think we can keep going though, because there's still a lot of content left, and I can email Kevin as well. And if not, there's stuff left.
He might be sleeping because he's in Asia.
Got it.
Okay, so let's move on. All right. Okay, so that's like a very process-oriented view of creators' lives and like the steps that they're following at a macro level. But on a micro level, how does this translate into what a creator does on a daily basis and how products can help them? So this is kind of like the experimental portion of class, and I'm like testing out this new material that I've never shown people before. So bear with me, and I'm curious to get everyone's thoughts. But in my opinion, creators are all on their individual journeys to reach creator market fit. And at the core of a creator's career is this concept of creator market fit. And just like startups who are trying to reach product market fit, creators are trying to reach creator market fit. Can anyone remind us of what product market fit is? Like a more sophisticated definition than what's on this slide. Retention. Customers buying what you want repeatedly. Kind of. When people are ripping your product out of your hands. I like that definition a lot. Growing so fast that your main problem is scaling, managing the scaling. Yeah. I think those are all really great indicators of product market fit. So just as a quick refresher, there's basically, I like this definition of product market fit. There's basically 3 components to product market fit. It's product value that solves the needs of customers, an ecosystem that values the product enough such that people are willing to pay for it, and a business model that fits customers and generates enough sales to keep the business sustainable. Other people have defined it differently. Like people have said that it's a value hypothesis that is comprised of like the features you need to build, the audience that's likely to care, and the business model that's required to entice a customer to buy your product. But regardless, it's like a product that delivers really high value to the market such that they're willing to pay for it. And likewise, creator market fit is really analogous to product market fit. It's the union between content, which is a creator's product, the audience, which is the creator's ecosystem, and the business model, which is how creators monetize. So all three elements need to be in place in order for me to say that this creator has a high degree of creator market fit. So the creator needs to be enjoying creating the content. There needs to be a large enough audience that cares about the content and that wants to consume it. And the business model needs to align with what is sufficient to keep the creator sustainable in their content creation and what keeps the audience consuming the product. If one of these components and circles is missing, then I would consider that creator to be pre-creator market fit. Maybe they're earlier on in their journeys, or they're aspiring creator, or maybe they're making content non-sustainably. For instance, like if you're at the intersection of just like content and business model, but don't have an audience, I would consider that to be like corporate content that no one really wants to consume, like maybe what you would see on your LinkedIn newsfeed. If you're at the intersection of business model and audience, but you don't really enjoy making the content, then that's probably like a lot of sponsored posts, shilling, like lots of branded things that feels inauthentic, and over time, you're probably going to lose your audience that way. And then if you're at the intersection of content and audience, but you don't have a business model, I think actually a lot of creators fit into this, but they're kind of still at the starving artist phase of being a creator. And it's interesting that most creators probably fall into this intersection without the business model part, because they have some external source of business model, like a full-time job that sustains them in content creation. It's also interesting that like creator market fit doesn't necessarily come from the same place. So in the tech world, a lot of creator products are supporting a part of creator market fit, and they might just do one or two jobs, but they're not completing all three of these circles. So for instance, on Instagram, a lot of creators are using Instagram to create content, to reach an audience, and to build an audience, but their business model is actually external to the platform. They're turning to things like Patreon or Fanjoy to sell merchandise or whatever else in order to monetize. In the podcasting space, content creation happens on a different platform that's different from where they're building their audience, and that's also different from their business model, which is sponsorships and ads. And so for founders, my question is always like, what part of creator market fit is your product absolutely critical in helping creators to achieve? Are you helping them to create content better than they could anywhere else? Are you helping them to discover an audience better than any other platform could? Or are you helping them complete like the business model part and help them sustain their content creation? I think that platforms are the most defensible when they offer all of the ingredients of creator market fit all in one platform. And the two platforms that come to mind, I'm curious if you can guess them actually, if you can guess them in the chat. But like when all three elements, content, audience, and business model come from the same place. Yes, you guys are so smart. Okay. Twitch and YouTube were the examples that I was thinking of, but actually some of these other ones also apply. When all three ingredients are being offered by the same platform, I think there's a really powerful feedback loop that happens between all three of these elements. Like your success in monetizing informs and helps improve the creator's content. And then the audience feedback helps improve the content as well. The audience feedback could help with monetization, and so on and so forth. It works a lot better in tandem on the single platform than it does if creators are disjointed and like turning to different platforms to cobble together all of these pieces. And that's why we also see platforms like Substack, which had historically just provided the business model, also now introduce features like Substack Reader, which helps people on the audience side and helps you to get discovered. So let's do this case study using me as the case study for creator market fit. So people have often joked that A16Z is a media company that monetizes through venture capital. Now, as an independent solo capitalist, I guess I'm a creator that monetizes through venture capital. So as a creator, I have a lot of different things going on in each of these circles. So in terms of content, I have my podcast. I'm on Clubhouse a lot. I do long form writing on Substack. I have my paid course here. There's Twitter content, there's TikTok content. There's an audience that I've built in lots of different places on Twitter, the newsletter, and my audience is typically comprised of founders and tech people. And then my business model is primarily through investing, but also through this paid course. And all of these things like sort of feed into each other and are very interconnected. And in terms of like each of these different components of creator market fit, if I think of myself as a creator whose primary goal is to be the best investor, then I can sort of prioritize like which of these content pieces is most suited to helping me be the best investor. I think long form writing on Substack is actually really, really helpful because it helps me like talk to founders directly, have like a direct line of connection to them, explain really long form ideas, go really deep into certain concepts. Whereas I think like TikTok is probably less important to my creator market fit because the folks who are watching me on TikTok are really young and like they're probably not going to be starting companies anytime soon. And then in terms of like the audience, like some parts of the audience definitely resonate more with my content than others. And so all of this like leads to this very complicated like interplay between all of the different component pieces. And actually, I think there's a huge opportunity for platforms and for tech products to inform me as a creator on how to better reach creator market fit. Like if my end goal is to be a better investor and to find the best deals, like what are all the different content platforms that I should be using and how much time should I be investing in them in order to achieve that goal? Like, should I spend less time on Twitter and more time on Substack? Should I spend more time on Clubhouse versus TikTok? Like which audience is most valuable? Today, like creators are figuring out their content market fit in a very intuitive, trial and error based way. But I think there's an opportunity for software products to give creators more guidance on what they should be spending more or less time on, what they should be investing more time on, and which parts of their audience to to pay more attention to in order to better reach creator market fit. And the last thing that I want to leave you guys with is there was a really amazing blog post last year from the founder of Superhuman all about the process that he used to figure out whether his company had product market fit. And basically, he just surveyed his customers and asked them, how disappointed would you be if you could no longer use Superhuman? And once he reached 40% saying that they would be very disappointed, like 40% or more people saying that they would be very disappointed if Superhuman were to go away, he knew that that was like a sign of really strong product market fit. And I think in the creator worlds, the analog to that is that creators are your users. And so if you surveyed your creators, like how many of you guys would be disappointed if you could no longer use Clubhouse or Substack or TikTok or whatever, or like run this paid course, like how disappointed would you be? That points creator platforms to their level of product market fit because creators are the genesis of value on that platform. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the content. I'm going to pause here for questions and answers. Kevin never got back to me. I hope he's okay.
We do have a lot of great questions. So I'll start with a question from Charlotte. With the cult trend, what happens to the creator middle class?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I hope that, like, I have very conflicted views about this. So I think it's a great thing that creators can like amass so much influence and user love that they can like become like sustainable business on their own. But the flip side of that is that attention on these platforms is being aggregated to like a very small subset of these creators. And so like the long tail of creators gets no views, gets no attention, gets no listens on Spotify, etc. And I think where this goes, like my hope as a person, and I think everyone has their own very subjective like value system and their goals, but my goal is like I just hope that more people in the world are able to make a living from their creative endeavors. Like if we have a world in which there's only 10,000 people or even just a million people who are able to make a living creatively, and they all represent these like super powerful cult leaders and no one else is able to make a living, I wouldn't be personally satisfied with that, even though there could be really great businesses that support them, because I just want this path to a livelihood through creative endeavors to be more accessible to everyone. But I think that this desire is somewhat counter to consumer needs and consumer desires. I think consumers do tend to gravitate towards like the top content creators. The top content creators do have network effects. They accrue a lot more resources that help them to make even better content and just like pull away from the rest of the content creators in the world. And so I think for me personally, where I see the creator middle class coming from is not like on a single given platform like Instagram or YouTube, is there a big like middle class of creators on that one single platform? I think the middle class of creators, to me, the more realistic path to that comes from that long tail of creators being able to go outside of the platform and monetize and cobble together income in so many different ways and stack together their earnings such that they're able to achieve a middle class income and to sustain their content creation that way. So for every like different segment of the creator universe, there's a different recipe for monetization. And it's not the case that like the middle class of creators comes from a platform like YouTube equalizing the number of views across all of their content creators. It instead comes from the middle class of creators having many more viable ways to monetize and to like price discriminate among their follower base.
Great. We have another question from Alex about the role of community. Alex, you still here?
You mean me?
Alex
all right.
Burstrove?
Oh yeah, that's me. Okay. So yeah, I was just curious of your point of view on the role of community in this whole cult thing, because obviously I made an experiment. I tried different views of Zoom during this thing today, and I tried it with everyone's faces and then with your face only, and I realized that it's way more exciting to see other people, even though they're not saying anything. But it makes that exciting. And also there was a lot going on in Slack and here in the chat. So obviously there's the value in the community. So I want to understand your position on that and how you see that.
Yeah, I think community plays a big part. So I think to my previous examples of all of the creator cult leaders, like they really lean on their communities and the energy that their communities bring in order to scale themselves. So they're not operating alone. They're oftentimes like duetting people, like remixing their content, pulling content from the communities, setting their communities on different missions to take different actions to scale themselves. And I think that like at a certain level of community, you're there just as much for the other people. Like the other people's fandom heightens your own appreciation for that content creator and allows it to become like that much more defensible. So I think the community element is like a key ingredient of a creator cult.
Thanks,
Okay.
Alex. Last question before we close out, Lee. Jiaqi, are you still on the Zoom? You have a question around the next stage after cults.
So my question was that, so cult seems to be something that provides audiences with purpose and meaning. But on the other hand, cult is also something that does not scale. So for instance, can we actually have 50 million cults? How do we segment, for instance, cult-like following? How do we make sure that we generate, say, diverse enough meaning and purposes for those 50 million communities?
Yeah, I think This is like still something that I'm grappling with, and I don't have all of the answers. This is also another theme of the course. Theme 1 of the course, creators are not homogeneous. Theme 2, I don't have all of the answers. So I hope you guys talk to each other. I think there's a few drawbacks of like the creator cult phenomenon that we're seeing. One is that the leverage and the power is shifting to the creators themselves rather than to the platforms. The platforms are kind of being commoditized. And if you're a creator that has a cult following, you can just move your audience to different places on a whim. Like if you get tired of YouTube and creating for YouTube, you can decide to shift to TikTok, and like your audience will come with you because they love you so much. And so that has implications for tech founders, because like if your creator base is populated with these creator cults, like that leaves you in a position of very little leverage. Like probably you can't increase your take rate. Your monetization model needs to be really creator friendly, etc. So I think creator cults aren't necessarily like such a great thing for tech platforms. And then societally, I think also it means like less attention that consumers can give to the creator middle class. Like if we're all watching the best content made by a select few content creators out there, that means that we don't have like the time or the attention to support the middle class of creators. Like this already happens on Netflix today. The homepage of Netflix is definitely directing you to the best content that they've produced, the content that they've spent $100 million developing. Like they're going to show that on the front page of Netflix rather than showing you the long tail of content, because they need to compete on the basis of like the best that they have, because they know that consumer attention is really limited. And I think cults are really similar. Like cults are like the most loved creators out there, and their audience has a ton of affinity for them and will always like be really hungry for more. But the implication is that like perhaps it's really hard for an emerging creator to break into that and to become also loved by those consumers. So I'm not entirely sure. Like I think there's product decisions that we can all collectively make to help empower the long tail. But I think some of that is even at odds with just like consumer psychology. And going back to your question, Alex, by the way, so communities, I think like someone made a comment in the Zoom chat, which I thought was really good, which is that like came here for the comments is one of the common YouTube comments. Andrew and Mazzy said
exactly.
that. Yeah, like I see that in TikTok as well. Like I think Gen Z right now thinks that Snapchat Spotlight is not as fun to use as TikTok because there's no comment section. There's no sense that there's is a shared experience. In TikTok, you'll often see comments like, I ran to the comment section, or like I clicked on comments as fast as I could, because it's just like really fun to consume the content together with other people rather than on your own. And that like heightens your appreciation for the content creator.
That's true, but also there could be a content that is being produced and in process by the community. So that's
Yeah.
is basically what's happening right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the community could also be the generator of completely new content. Like Lenny does this with his newsletter. He'll crowdsource threads from his Slack group of his paid subscribers and actually put that into future newsletters as original content, which I think is really interesting.
But what about revenue sharing with them?
I don't think he does that.
Shame.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for all of the amazing comments. So I'm sure we'll get Kevin back, hopefully sometime. I hope he's okay. But let's just like wrap up here, and I'll coordinate with Kevin offline. But just some closing thoughts. Okay, so here's a quick summary of what we discussed today. Creators aren't homogeneous. There's lots of different sub-segments of the creator economy. There's going to be new creators arising in the future that we can't even envision yet. We can draw parallels between creators and cult leaders. Creators share some similarities. They have a hierarchy of needs. And there's this like element of creator market fit that every creator is trying to reach. I'm curious, like, what stuck out to you the most? What do you think is the most interesting of this? You can put it into the chat. Creator market fit. Amazing. Okay, that's awesome, because next week, Justin Moore is going to talk more about creator market fit, because he is a YouTuber and a much more successful creator than me, and probably has better creator market fit than I do. So he'll talk more about his own personal path to creator market fit. And then here's just a quick rundown of the terminology that we talked through today. Here's a few concepts that just really summarize the key points of this class. And this week's project is going to be composed of 2 parts. So this is the first part, and then after Thursday, I'll give you guys the second part. But this first part is all about creator cult enabling products. And so you're going to choose a cult enabling product of your choice, and then describe how the platform either enables or does not enable the formation of creator cults. And then for each of the areas where it falls short, you're going to brainstorm how the platform might actually implement new features in order to strengthen the enablement of creator cults. Awesome. And then we'll be back on Thursday to talk about all the different ways that creators can now monetize and build businesses.